Hi, my name is Will Macias, and for my Capstone project, I chose wild horse populations in Nevada. Ever since sophomore year of high school, I've been working with horses, and in the past year and a half, I've started working with a cutting horse trainer named Jason Diaz, and this has just deepened my appreciation for horses and everything they do for me. I bought a horse of my own, who I work with and train almost every day, but what really sparked my curiosity in this issue is this horse right here. His name is Laredo, and he was once a wild Mustang, and one of the horses that was instrumental on my journey of learning how to ride. I was always curious about what Laredo's life was like before he was took out of the wild and made into a pet. So that's part of what sparked my curiosity on this issue. So my essential question, how can the state of Nevada better manage wild horse herds while still maintaining a sustainable number of these herds on the range? So just a quick couple of numbers for you. There's about 73,100 wild horses in the United States alone. About 38,000 of those are just in Nevada. And wild horse populations, when left unmanaged, can double in size in just 4 years. So there's just a quick population graph since 1996, where you can see that they stayed about that 40,000 mark, and they skyrocketed up to 96,000 in 2020 and started going down. So how these horses got here in the first place. There were horses in America, but not as we know it today. Think about 12,000 years ago, when they were not the horses we know now, but horses nonetheless. So those eventually went extinct and were only brought back by the Spanish conquistadors during their expeditions. And clearly, a couple got away, and now we have what we have today. So, what effects do these horses have on the ecosystem? These horses will graze rangeland basically as they please. There's very little natural predation of these horses. So, besides just eating all the forage that could be used for cattle or sheep or any other livestock animal, they also decimate ranchers' fences on their rangeland, which leads ranchers to have to move to separate rangeland farther away from these horses, which drives up the cost of transportation, which eventually affects the price of beef that you pay. So I went on field work. I went locally in Nevada. I went to Reno to meet with a couple of horse trainers in the Bureau of Land Management. I also went to the Carson Valley to study the pine nut wild horses in the Pine Nut Mountain Range. I also took a trip to Fernley just to talk with some equine vets about how these horses live and what they do. And yeah. So the first people I met with were the Pine Nut Wild Horse Advocates. I met with their vice president, Kirk Muller, where we went out to the mountain range and saw these horses in the wild. So the main things I learned from this trip, this part of my expedition, was how these horses, their herd dynamics in the wild. So there's two types of horses, stallions and mares. Stallions being male horses and mares being female horses. So each stallion, there's about 80 horses in the Pine Nut Mountain Range, and they form what's called bands. So there's about 1 to 2 stallions per band, and there can be anywhere from 2 to however many mares. The most interesting thing I learned is that there's more stallions than mares in these environments. This is mainly because there's a mare can join any band she wants, really. But stallions can't just go out and join a band. There are stallions that will take junior, younger horses under their wing and even give them 1 to 2 mares to take out on their own to start a band. But a lot of stallions are left without mares, so they form what's called a bachelor band. Bachelor bands are just a group of young wild horses that's basically a roaming frat house. There's fights, there's biting, and they have a very, very low survival rate, because when horses get injured in the wild, there's no vet to call, and nature just takes its course. Another interesting thing I learned from Mr. Muller was that they use what's called PZP darting to control their population. PZP darting is a dart that you shoot a mare with, which makes them infertile over the course of 7 years, I was told. They have to dart one specific mare 7 times each year for effective population control. Another extremely interesting thing I learned is that they truck up to about 4 trucks of water a day out there to a man-made pond just to keep these horses living. So, next I met with horse training experts. Firstly, I met with Dan Iriarte from Team Iriarte Horsemanship. They focus on taking wild adopted horses and training them up to be rideable for your average rider. So a great thing I learned from him is that many people will buy Mustangs and get in over their head. When you think of beginner or starter things, they're usually cheaper than the more advanced things. But this is almost the opposite for horses. So many people will see the price tag on a wild Mustang and think, oh, well, that seems like a great beginner option. But Mustangs, what they make up in price, what they lack in price, they make up for in the wealth of knowledge you need to train them. So another very interesting fact I learned from Dan is that his wife was a vet at the Comstock Equine facility, and she said that PZP darting only has about a 30% effectiveness rate. Lastly, I met with Jason Diaz of Painted D Ranch to discuss how we can better incorporate these horses into the show world and drive up demand for adoption. So what his thought is that these horses should be focused on in the Western pleasure and ranch riding classes. So these classes are very tame and slow-paced compared to some events like think rodeo where it's roping and fast. Ranch riding and Western pleasure are judged on how the horse moves and how much control the rider has. So the best way to get these horses into those environments is to subsidize show fees or waive show fees altogether for Mustangs, because right now there's no reason you would take a quarter horse, which is the industry standard for those disciplines, over a Mustang. Now the reason you wouldn't is because there's bloodlines of horses that were great, and like stallions that were great and mares that were great, and you put them together and you get a baby that's talented from the get-go. So you would think, well, I could get this baby who basically already knows what to do, I just got to show him how, or wants to do it, I just got to show him how. Or I could get this wild horse that has no idea what's going on and try and get him to do it. Now you will eventually have success with a Mustang, but there's no reason you'd want to if there was no benefit. So we can add benefits like special events only for Mustangs, waiving Mustang show fees, or special awards at the end of the year that could come with cash. And I forgot to mention, with Dan, I learned that he doesn't really like to take Mustangs over the age of 5 or 6 because at that point they're just kind of wild in their mind compared to a younger horse who's more malleable to what you want to teach them. Lastly, I met with the Bureau of Land Management Palomino Valley facility. This is a facility, it's the largest BLM holding facility in the US, and it's right here in Palomino Valley, which is just up from Reno. Something very interesting I learned, so they have about 1,000 horses at any given time. They can hold up to 1,800, and they focus on sending horses out. Some big things they do is the Mustang inmate program. So across a couple prisons in Nevada, they have opportunities for inmates to work with and train horses, which will eventually be auctioned off. Another shocking fact I learned is that Mustangs nationwide only have about a 10% adoption rate. Now, what happens to the horses that don't get adopted? There's 2 options. One, they're sent to an off-range, so just think pasture in the Midwest like Iowa or South Dakota, where they just live out the rest of their lives. Now, the second more not great option is that they'll be sent to they'll be sent to Texas, and from there they'll either go to Mexico or Canada to be harvested for meat and other animal products. So, my takeaways. I thought it was extremely important that I met with people on all sides of this issue to learn what it means to them and why they care so much about it. Without that, I wouldn't have such an understanding of this issue. And for my essential answers, here's what I think the main thing is. The localization and regulation of the harvesting of these horses. These horses are from the US and they should be our responsibility to deal with. Now, Unfortunately, when those horses are sent to Canada, I think I said about 20,000 yearly are shipped off. About 3,000 of those go to Canada, where it's about an 18-hour trailer ride, which is like the legal maximum you can trailer a horse commercially without food and water. And they're also just kind of packed into that trailer, so it's not a very humane option. And then the horses that are sent to Mexico, anything can happen with them because there is almost no regulation on how those horses will be and can be treated. So I think we should localize and regulate the harvesting of those horses. There's a saying in ranching that a cow only has one bad day in its life, and I think that should be the same for our wild horses. But the biggest thing is we need to increase adoption. The more horses we can prevent from being sent to those facilities, the better. I think the best steps we can take are providing training, clinics, or help to people, because I think that's the main reason people wouldn't want a Mustang, is it's a lot of effort to get these horses tuned up and ready to ride. But the easier we can make that for people, and the more we can incentivize adopting these horses, the better. Incorporating them into the show world could also be a great step. Right now, equine shows and equine events in general are extremely popular, with NCHA cutting even having a special cutting show just for celebrities. So there's already a decent amount of interest starting to grow in the sport. So I think it would be great to get some Mustangs in there. Thank you.